Hey everybody, Hoosier Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking about episode 3 of season 1 of Arrow called Lone Gunmen. I'm not sure why it's Lone Gunmen rather than Lone Gunman, because really there's only one crazy dude running around with a gun this episode. You know, maybe it's a little bit of a nod to that old X-Files spinoff, but you know what? Semantics, right? And speaking of season 1 of Arrow, if you haven't heard, the show has gotten a full 22 episode go. Apparently, it's gotten extraordinarily good ratings. It's basically was the highest rated show for the CW in like 3 years, and apparently, I just read that it really scored some massive ratings on its debut in Great Britain. So yeah, nothing but good news for this show so far. And this is another really great episode. This was a lot. I had a lot of fun watching this episode. There was a lot of exciting stuff going on, a lot of interesting stuff going on. So let's get right into it. And let's start talking about Thea. She seems a good place as any to start. We are seeing more of her, screwing around, basically being, young Oliver before, young jerk Oliver. And, this is kind of I don't really want to say it's an understandable reaction. It is to some degree. Her father's dead. Her brother, as far as she knew, was dead. That hit her really hard. She even says that her mother barely has spoken of her father since the time of the accident. It's clear that there's been a very major disconnect between them. The way she even talks to her mother basically says that she doesn't really consider her to be her family, just they sort of like two people who happen to live together, and she just basically kind of says to her mom, you stay out of my way and I'll stay out of yours. And honestly, frankly, I think this kind of behavior is going to be getting a little old for viewers. I mean, it's only been 3 episodes, and I know I'm a little tired about it. And last week's episode, where she's going on about how I was suffering just as much as you were. That really rings just so incredibly ridiculous. I mean, Thea was living in a mansion in Star City. She was never cold, never hungry. If she got sick, she had a doctor immediately. Meanwhile, Oliver's on his island, trying not to die of exposure or dysentery or God only knows what, and probably having to eat bugs to stay alive. And then she's going there saying, like, you suffered as much as I suffered, as much as you did. Now, granted, Thea's a teenager. She's probably like, 16 years old, and kids that age, not to be insulting to anybody who's watching this review who's about that age, but perspective, or a kind of ability to really see the greater, wider picture, not the strongest suit of people that age. They kind of, this is true for all of us when we're that age. We basically see our life experiences as kind of the be all end all. We haven't matured to the point where we can really truly understand the experiences of others. It's sort of like how, when you're about 16, most of us around that age really fall in love for the first time, and we're all convinced at that age that no one has ever fallen in love as deeply or as passionately as we have at this particular moment. That our love is like something that totally redefines love for the entire human race. And little time goes by and we realize, oh, I'm just like everybody else who's ever been in love. Okay, I don't know if that was the best example I could have given for that situation, but I think you get where I'm coming from there. Thea really thinks she understands what Oliver went through. She really has no clue. And I'm not just talking about the crazy stuff that happened on the island. If Oliver really had just been stuck on that island and had managed to survive, with nothing extraordinary happening beyond that, Thea would still totally not understand even remotely what he had gone through. And the fact that Oliver has not turned around and really shoved that in her face, I think that's a scene that's just eventually going to have to happen. Now, granted, I don't think Oliver's going to be, very angry, I guess is maybe the word I'm going to look for it. If nothing else, Oliver's a guy who controls his emotions pretty well, but I have a feeling there's going to be a moment where he just, with one or two sentences, really drives the knife into Thea to make her understand, like, no, little sister, you have no idea what I've gone through. And frankly, I think that's what Thea needs. She really does need to have some greater perspective on the repercussions of her actions. I mean, look at, Moira, she's a very morally ambiguous character, even though, granted, she's not a terribly well-defined character at this moment. But you can see that this is really bothering her, and that this disconnect that she has from her daughter is something that does emotionally upset her. And I do like that for whatever's going on with Moira, her desire to reconnect with Thea is genuine, and that scene between the two of them was really well done. It was a very nice character moment for both of them. And I do like that it does show that while the Queens are an emotionally messed up family, they are people who do genuinely love each other, and that they are willing to do what it takes to really start genuinely and truly healing their family. And of course, she ended up being the one that went and spilled the whole thing about Laurel and Tommy. Now, I don't know if I completely agree with Laurel's assessment that Oliver knew. That really is not how I read that situation at all. The fact that he just had that emotional control, I think, is really what threw Laurel for a loop. And okay, I can see that. If you expect someone to really just be completely what the heck, and they don't have that reaction, well, it's not unreasonable to think that you might wonder, well, maybe they already knew about it. But you know what? Let's move on and let's talk about Laurel since I brought her up. I kind of am a little disappointed with her character-wise this episode. First of all, Oliver helped save your life last episode, Laurel. Now, granted, it was Diggle who did, the majority of the heavy lifting there, but Ollie did help. He was there. He saw the situation. He immediately took action to help get you to safety. And before that, you had started to get some genuine insight into just how emotionally messed up Oliver was. So I don't really know why you think that him not having the emotional reaction that you expect is really not just a sign that maybe he's a profoundly changed person. I mean, come on, you know perfectly well, and you are old enough to understand that what he went through on that island had to have messed him up. Now, granted, if all she had seen had been the party boy side of Oliver before this, I can kind of be on board with. I could have been on board with her having that reaction. But after the scene where Oliver really does let his guard down a little, and she starts to get some insight into how much he really has changed, this reaction just doesn't really ring true to me. And speaking of which, okay, if Laurel has this ability to go out and kick butt like she did this episode, where the heck was that last episode? Now, granted, I guess you could to whatever training she had from her detective dad probably did not cover dealing with triad assassins. That's a little bit beyond what they teach at the police academy or the local martial arts school. Wherever she learned all of that. But I just kind of have a feeling that she should have been a little bit more like she was this episode, a little bit more calm. Now, granted, she's getting attacked in her home. She was completely blindsided by this. Even in situations like that, even people with training can, lose their cool and even panic a little bit. So, okay, I can kind of understand that, but that's really straddling the line of plausibility for me. But at least it kind of gives us a hint that she is further along, possibly, on the path to becoming Black Canary someday than we had previously expected. And I know that this will probably satisfy some of the critics who were really, really unhappy that she didn't seem to know how to fight. Well, I guess it certainly saves us the idea that she's going to be able to go from nobody to Black Canary being who is really on the top ranks of badass martial artists in the DC universe. So if she comes from a background of having some self-defense, then her transition to being a superhero would be much easier to take in terms of believability. And let's see. Let's continue on talking about Laurel. The idea that Tommy is genuinely interested in her. The last time around, we sort of just get the implication that they were just friends with benefits. Here, he's basically going to her like, "Look, I genuinely want to make this work. I am willing to try and become the kind of person who can maintain that one man, one woman kind of relationship that you obviously want." And this is interesting. This is really not the sort of thing that we would expect from Tommy. Apparently, his feelings for her are quite a bit deeper than we'd been led to believe. Maybe even Laurel had thought. And the idea that he's going to try and become a better person for her, that's some unexpected character development from a guy like Tommy. Now, whether or not it's really a good thing that he's trying to make these changes just to be with a girl he likes is somewhat debatable. I'm of the opinion that if you're going to change and try and improve yourself, you should try and do these things for yourself, not for someone else. Because if you're not doing it for yourself, then you're just not doing it for the right reasons. You have to do things like that for yourself first and foremost. Now, there's nothing wrong with using another person to inspire you, but I think it's just coming from doing a good thing but for the wrong reasons, I guess is the best way that I can think to put it. If you really want to improve yourself as a person, you cannot look externally. You have to find that sort of thing from within. But that's just my personal take on that sort of thing. So let's get into we'll talk about some of the other characters, but right now I want to talk about some of the interesting little shout outs to the greater DC universe. First of all, since we're talking about Laurel, she mentions having a case for somebody named Jurgens. Well, I'm pretty sure this is a nod to Dan Jurgens, a very talented writer and artist for DC Comics. I'm not aware of him having any major history with Green Arrow as a character. In fact, Dan Jurgens is actually best known as a creator on Superman. But he's done other stuff around the DC universe. He did a rather underrated take on Teen Titans, which is actually, and I'm very much in the minority here among Teen Titans fans, that's actually where I came on board with the Teen Titans. It was a short-lived, but reasonably solid collaboration that he did with George Perez, who is, the most legendary artist in Teen Titans history. So that could have just been the people behind the show are a fan of his. He's certainly a talented guy, and he's also done some really nice stuff on Spider-Man. But anyway, yes, my favorite, and this is just a little thing. Oliver briefly mentions that Deadshot has performed assassinations in Markovia. Now, if you're a fan of the comics, especially Teen Titans, you are familiar with Markovia. It is the home nation's fictional country somewhere in Eastern Europe. In fact, I actually believe one comic I read mentions that the Markovian language is actually a dialect of Hungarian. Kind of give you a little sense of where in the DC universe this country is supposed to be. But anyway, this country is the home of the superheroes Geoforce and Terra. Not the evil Terra, as far as I know. There's two Terras. It's actually extraordinarily confusing, but whatever. Geoforce and Terra, superheroes from Markovia, have a long history in the Teen Titans comic books. So yeah, and I love the Teen Titans. I love the comics. I love the cartoon series. The Teen Titans are just absolutely awesome, and the fact that they're giving shout outs to Teen Titans on this show. I mean, there are no words for just how thrilled I am by that. Now, another one that we get this episode is the character of Felicity Smoke. And her name is not actually spelled like it would be spelled the word smoke. I believe it's Soamke. Okay, whatever. She is the stepmother of Ronnie Raymond, who most folks would best know as Firestorm. Now, the idea of her being here in the Arrow comics, I mean, she's just basically a businesswoman. Here she's sort of Oliver's unofficial tech geek this episode. Who knows if we'll be seeing her again, but, maybe. But the fact that they would pull this character to use, I mean, I'm completely baffled here. She doesn't really. She's extremely obscure. I'd never even heard of this character. Apparently, somebody saw her name on a casting sheet somewhere and sort of mentioned it. So I know nothing about her beyond the fact that she's basically Firestorm's stepmom, and that she seems to be very, very different here than what she is in the comics. I'm not really sure why they would do that. Maybe just somebody on the show likes Firestorm. I don't know. But it's a shout out to the comics, so I'm down with that. Now let me see here. Yes. I have kept forgetting to mention this. But the place where the queens live, if that place looks familiar to you, that's because it's stately Luther Mansion from Smallville. Apparently they have a little bit better security at the Queen household than they did at the Luther household. We haven't seen people routinely barging in there to accuse the Queen family of... Oh, wait. That's what Quentin Lance seems to be there for. Now, last time around, I kind of questioned whether or not Quentin... No, actually, the first episode, I kind of questioned whether Quentin, given his connections to the family, would be allowed to conduct investigations involving them. Apparently, this is something that other fans of the show have been talking about, and according to some of the fans who are more familiar with the law than I am, it's basically, as I suspected, no way in hell would Quentin be allowed to be involved in any investigation involving the Queens, given his personal connections to them. But this is television, so the rule of drama takes precedent. And, you can create drama by having Quentin be the one that does this. And speaking of Quentin, look, dude, I understand you're kind of pissed at Oliver, but don't forget, he did help save your daughter's life, and that she probably would be dead if it hadn't been for Oliver's bodyguard. If Oliver hadn't gone over there with ice cream, Laurel would totally be dead, so freaking cut Oliver a break already. And you know what? He wasn't... there, he didn't kill your daughter. Your daughter happened to be with Oliver when there was an accident / sabotage that she died as a result of. Oliver did not do anything at all to cause Sarah's death, other than bring her on his boat. Now, granted, Quentin's not really going to be emotionally rational about this. He's looking for somebody to blame, and he's picked Oliver for really what is basically, as far as he knows, an act of God. She died in a storm. But still, it doesn't really speak terribly well of his character that he just doesn't seem to be willing to let up. I don't know. I don't think I really feel like going down that road too much further. Let me see here. I'm just looking over my notes. I want to make sure I talk about everything that I want to get through. Oh yeah. Speaking of shoutouts to the DC Comics, of course we have a scene at Big Belly Burger. This is a fast food chain. There's sort of a running thing in the Superman comics. That might be where Jurgens comes from. Now that I stop and think about it. And did you notice that Deadshot was hanging out in room 52? Well, if you're familiar with the DC universe, you almost certainly know of the maxi series, I guess I should say, 52. And if you're still into the comics, you've doubtlessly heard of the New 52, the New 52 titles of the new DC universe that were launched last year, I believe it was. So I do get a kick out of those. Now, let's get back to talking about the characters. Let's talk about Diggle. Now, I did really enjoy him this episode. Here, we're really starting to get insights into who Dig is as a character beyond his relationship with Oliver. He's got his ex-sister-in-law. His brother died at the Big Belly Burger. I assume he was, maybe the manager or something, and got killed in a robbery. But that's speculation on my part. But I do like that he has more going on than his job. He has more going on than his relationship with Oliver. And, there's definitely, after this episode, quite a bit going on there, but I'll talk about that in a minute. What I'm actually reminded of is when he has that conversation with Oliver about opening up the nightclub in the Glens, the bad part of Starling City. And just the tone of his voice when he calls Oliver a white knight. Now, I really like that. I mean, it's pretty obvious that he basically, in that situation, is basically considering Oliver to be nothing more than a limousine liberal there. And, obviously there's some racial undertones to that situation. As I have said in my previous videos, I don't really like to talk about race and racism in these videos simply because people, when you bring that sort of thing up, really tend to take anything and everything extremely personal, and conversations have a tendency to get ugly and just go to hell really fast with no substantive discussion actually happening. All right, I have seen that happen way too many times. I don't want it here on my channel. Thank you very much. But I'm actually reminded a little bit about the old Green Lantern, Green Arrow comics, where Oliver and Hal would talk about the various social issues of the day. And this was happening back in the early 70s, when they were talking about things like, the government, environmentalism, and all sorts of other things. And again, I'm just saying that's what it reminded me of. And, no doubt about it, Dig comes. I get the impression that Dig, from what he says and what we see in this episode, is a guy who probably does come from the Glens. And Oliver is, of course, a rich guy from the rich part of town. So I do think that Dig does offer some insight into the world that Oliver doesn't come from. He has a very different perspective on Starling City than Oliver does, for a multitude of reasons. And I think that now that he knows that Oliver is Arrow and is obviously going to be much more involved in what Ollie does, I think that perspective is going to become not only useful, but some very interesting stuff going on there. And in relation to what I just said, there is one thing that I would like to point out here, and I'm just going to point this out and pretty much leave it at that. First of all, I like the fact that, and I do consider him a main character, that we do actually have somebody on the show who's not white. But also, even more interestingly, we also have two supporting characters, Walter and Quentin's partner, whose name I don't think they've said his name, or I haven't caught it yet, who is also black. So we have a main character who is black and two supporting characters who are black. Now, accurate TV shows painting a racially accurate picture of America is undeniably a problem on modern American television. All right? And I again, I don't want to get really heavily into this because, I don't want a flame war breaking out on my channel. But I do think that Arrow does deserve some credit for having three characters on the show who are black. So that's all I'm going to say about that. Let's leave it at that. Everybody just, gotta stay cool about this, all right? Because if things get hairy in the comments, then I will remove comments and, if necessary, ban people from commenting here. I hate to do that, but I expect everybody to be a mature adult around here. even if you are not actually an adult. I still expect you to be a mature, reasonable person. Come on, guys. At the end of the day, we're talking about a TV show. Okay, now let's move on to some more cheery things. First of all, I regret slightly that I haven't brought this up before, but the music on the show is actually really good. It really intensifies the mood. It really makes the action scenes exciting. And the great thing about it is, unless you're specifically stop and think about it, most of the time you don't notice it. And even better, it's not some currently. The music isn't stuff by some forgettable band that the record label attached to the network is trying to push. This isn't Smallville, where at the end of the credits, they say like, oh, and the music from this episode was provided by some crap band that nobody's going to remember in 5 years. Okay, so let me see here. One thing that I do want to talk about that sort of bothered me this episode is Oliver going out and doing the whole parkour thing in the middle of the day, while not even doing anything to conceal his identity. I mean, for God's sake, Oliver, get a hoodie or something. Anyway, also during this episode, we learned that at some point, Oliver joined the Russian mafia on that island. Now, this kind of makes me wonder, did Oliver, in fact, spend all of his time on that island? Or did he leave and just end up back there? And speaking of which, the Russian gangster dude, after Oliver goes out and says like, okay, I want you to help me find Deadshot, the guy says, well, I'm going to go and check on you. And if you aren't who you say you are, I'm going to send my mechanic here to kill your family and you. Okay, look, Russian gangster guy, Oliver just beat your mechanic's ass right in front of you. He disarmed that guy like it was nothing, and you were standing right there. Do you think he's honestly going to be intimidated by your threat of sending a guy he has personally made look like a complete chump out to kill his family is going to scare him? Seriously, that makes no sense. It's like, oh, well, I'm going to send this guy. You've already proved you can, make look like a complete wuss out to kill your family. Well, gee, dude, and I'll have him kill you too, even though you, just minutes ago... Okay, you get what I'm saying. I mean, that is absolutely ridiculous. Okay. So, let's talk briefly about Deadshot. Now, Deadshot is a guy with a surprising amount of history in the DC universe. He has been around since 1950, introduced originally as an enemy of Batman. He was one of his creators was none other than Bob Kane, a guy who, with the help of artist Bill Finger, created a character you may have heard of called Batman. Yeah, one of the guys that created Deadshot helped create Batman. So he's of course very different from his counterpart in the comics, but there are the obvious nods there. Of course, the main one being his name is still Floyd Lawton. I'm not aware of him having any habit of tattooing his victims' names on his body. Honestly, that reminds me of the Batman villain, Mr. Zaze, however the heck you say it, who kills people and then will always kind of make a little slice on his skin in little groups of 5 for every person that he kills. But, hey, this is a different version of Deadshot that kind of gives him a little bit of a personality, some traits. He's got the monocle over one eye. I guess I should call that a goggle or a scope or something like that. Again, one of Deadshot's trademarks, as are the little wrist guns. Now, granted, he's not running around in the silver and red costume that we all associate with Deadshot, but, well, frankly, that would just kind of look ridiculous. Here we see something that's very in keeping with the show's preference for realism. Now, what I didn't expect was Deadshot to die this episode. Now, granted, this is a superhero show, so you never know, but it does. I get the feeling that this isn't going to be a show where villains are going to be coming back from the dead an awful lot. Still, it sort of seems like a waste to just take a villain like Deadshot and kill him off in one episode when he has only a half dozen, not even a half dozen lines. So, maybe we'll see him again, but they're going to have to come up with one heck of an explanation for that. Then again, you never know. Maybe the goggles stopped the arrow just in time, and Deadshot was faking being dead. I don't know. We'll find out, I'm sure. Now, one other thing that I want to talk about, and this is just a little ridiculous, I know, but okay, in the scene where Deadshot is shooting the people at the party, did you notice that after he has fired several shots and there are already people running around hiding and all this other stuff, he shoots a woman who is apparently walking up to the bar getting ready to take a bottle of champagne out of a bucket sitting on top of the bar. Again, this is after a couple of people have been shot. There are people running around screaming, ducking down. This lady apparently decided she was going to go over there and try and steal a bottle of champagne during all this, and she got shot for her trouble. Okay, either I saw that scene wrong, or this is the stupidest woman on the face of God's green earth. Okay, so let's bring it back to Dig real briefly. So now Dig is in on the secret. Now this, of course, makes his character one. Well, this is basically a necessary change. We're supposed to take Dig seriously. We're supposed to see that he is a very competent guy. From the very beginning, it's shown that he's realizing that Oliver is not the person that he pretends to be. So if Oliver is going to continue to be able to ditch him and all this other stuff continuously, then Dig just ends up looking like a moron. But if he kind of comes in there and sort of, I hesitate to call him the Alfred, but somebody who is in on the secret, who can help Oliver in various ways to protect his identity and all of that, well, that continues to allow him to seem a more competent character. Oliver could possibly pass on some of the things that he's learned to Dig to help him, compete on a more even level. Again, Dig held his own for a little while against China White, but if it wasn't for Oliver, he'd be dead. So again, there's a lot of doors that it opens for Dig's character after this happening. And frankly, it's an extremely smart move. It keeps him as a formidable and interesting character, and really propels him into the forefront. It really solidifies him as a main character on the show. And now let's briefly speak about what we saw on the island this week. I have no idea who that Chinese guy is. Really. I've been floating a few ideas around, but nobody really comes to mind. If this is a neat established DC character, then I got no idea who he is, or like with characters like Walter Steele, who in the comics is a Caucasian guy, he's been changed to an Asian fellow. Like the first person that really came to my mind was Richard Dragon, but in the comics he's also a Caucasian guy and an American. So I really don't know how much of the character would stay there if he were changed to some Chinese dude. So yeah, like I said, I have no idea who this dude might be, but I have a feeling we'll be finding out more about him pretty soon. So anyway, folks, this was a really good episode. There was a lot going on, lots of shout-outs to the DC universe, lots of interesting developments with the character, particularly with Diggle, and just another really good episode of a really good TV show. I'm already looking forward to next week's episode, and I am so absolutely thrilled that we're getting a full season of this show. I will, of course, review all 22 episodes, and I hope you'll tune in for my reviews of those. Anyway, folks, with that said, let's wrap that up. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. You can, of course, follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi. And until next time, take care and have a good one.